And today we have special guest with West Virginia chapter of AARP, and they are experts in resources for caregivers. We'd like to remind you there's two ways to submit your questions. We want you to be part of the conversation today. And so you can submit your questions one or two ways. One, by emailing Brittany, Brittany.Bruce at marshall.edu. Or if you hover over your screen, you should see a toolbar, and there's like a conversation icon. If you click that, it'll pop up a conversation chat, and you can just type your question directly in the chat feature, and we will get to them during our Q&A. Just a quick reminder that this segment is being recorded for future reference and playback. And again, thank you for taking a few minutes to join us this morning to listen to our friends at AARP West Virginia. We are going to start this morning by giving just a small background of the Alliance for the Economic Development of Southern West Virginia. So the Alliance partners, we're made up of 2- and 4-year institutions. There are 10 of us, and there are some people that have called in, so you're not going to be able to see my screen, so I'm going to read them off to you. Bluefield State College, Bridge Valley Community and Technical College, Concord University, Marshall University, Mount West Community and Technical College, New River Community and Technical College, Southern West Virginia Community and Technical College, West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine, West Virginia State University, and West Virginia University Institute of Technology. So if you look at a map, we're really Mason, Clay, Webster, Pocahontas down. It's 21 county footprint. We represent about 30,000 students. We are project-based and results-driven. We have several current projects through the Alliance. Right now, we're participating in one of those. For the 40 Top Virtual Roundtable series, we're going to do 15 weeks of programming, hosting 40 West Virginia leaders on various topics. Our Small Communities Big Solutions Conference, please save the date. It's November 16th. And this gives us a way to network and connect within our communities and really celebrate West Virginia's successes. There are 4 working groups within the Alliance. We have entrepreneurship, tourism, workforce development, and addiction recovery reentry. Our presidents meet on a quarterly basis, and our Operation Council, made up of the 10 colleges and universities, we meet twice a month. I'd like to remind you before we start with today's program that we have future programming coming up. Next week, we're going to host West Virginia Agriculture Commissioner Kent Leonhardt to talk about West Virginia farmers markets in the COVID-19 pandemic and our food supply chain. Should be a very interesting conversation. On June 24th, we have a very large panel. We're teaming up once again with the Public Education Collaborative, and we're hosting our COVID-19 czar and Dr. Clay Marsh and the Benham Foundation, and Dr. John Destin's going to be giving an overview of the economy in West Virginia. And our friends at Osteopathic School of Medicine will be talking about some innovative things that they're doing, along with Marshall University President Jerry Gilbert. On Wednesday, July 1st, you can join me as I host a working session, kind of like an open mic focus group conversation of what we've learned during COVID-19 and where do we go from here. So we're looking to add future programming. If you have an idea, a concept, please reach out to the Alliance. We'd love to hear your ideas and input, and we can see if we can work something out. Now I'd like to turn it over to our special guest. Right now, I have to say, Gayleen Miller, she is AARP West Virginia State Director, and I have worked with Gayleen for over many, many years. And Gayleen is a true expert in senior services. She has spent a majority of her professional career working to help seniors and our West Virginia families. And so, Gayleen, I'm going to turn it over to you and you can introduce your state president. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to the Alliance for Economic Development for Southern West Virginia for inviting AARP. We are delighted to participate in this 40 top virtual roundtable and talk about something that's very important to AARP and I think to all West Virginians, and that is our family caregivers. We think there are 4 kinds of people in the world today: people who are serving as family caregivers, people who may have been family caregivers, people who will potentially be family caregivers, and folks who might need a family caregiver in the future. So that really covers all the bases. So we're happy to be here. As you said, AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we are working to promote the well-being and health of West Virginians and Americans 50 plus and their families. So today we're going to focus on family caregivers. And during the pandemic, we wanted to share some tips and recommendations and suggestions, resources and information for employers, for family caregivers, for folks who may be juggling with taking care of children and taking care of parents or spouses, families, neighbors, friends. So hopefully we can share some information that will be useful for folks today that they can take and use in their community. Joining me today is my special guest and my partner, Jane Marks, and she is our West Virginia State Volunteer President. Before Jane became the AARP West Virginia State President, she was the Executive Director for the Alzheimer's Association in West Virginia. And as part of her duties, she dealt with both professional and family caregivers, interacted with them daily. She also became what is known as a certified dementia specialist, a subject matter expert on Alzheimer's and related dementias. Over the years, she has published numerous articles. She's presented at regional, national, and even international conferences on caregiving and dementia. But probably most importantly, Jane served as a caregiver for her mother. And so she's personally experienced some of the challenges, the stresses and the frustrations that caregivers go through. So I'm going to begin today's presentation with some questions and answers with Jane and some resources that we hope will be helpful to the folks who are on the call today. And on our Teams meeting, these platforms are so much fun to deal with when we're talking about the pandemic and dealing virtually. But again, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Jane, thanks for joining me.
Partner.
Thanks. So let's just jump right in, Jane. We know caregivers are facing challenges every single day. So what are some of the new challenges that family caregivers may be facing in this time of COVID-19?
Well, the first challenge that they're facing is COVID-19, trying to keep their loved one and themselves healthy. You can't be a caregiver if you're not healthy, and certainly we have to worry about those loved ones for whom we're providing care because depending on their condition, they certainly may be those folks with the pre-existing conditions that heighten their risk for developing COVID. Also, depending on their condition, if there are some cognitive issues, trying to have to explain to them why folks might be wearing masks or why we're not hugging and kissing anymore. I was recently on a phone call with someone who has an autistic grandson, and they said he's very frustrated because he can't play with his friends. He doesn't understand the masks, and trying to explain that to him is a challenge. If you have people coming in the home help, you've got to worry about their health. You've got to worry about if they're wearing the masks and that. In your opening remarks, you mentioned that you may have extra people at home. You may have your college kids at home. Now you've got more laundry, more people in the house, more people to cook for, and certainly you may be trying to do math and science and social studies with your children. Hopefully that's slowing down now that summer is approaching, but also you're going to still have to keep those kids busy, even if you're not doing the schoolwork. And lastly, if you're also trying to work from home and juggle all those balls, that's going to raise your stress just a little bit.
No doubt about it. So in general, what are some things that a family caregiver could do at this time to try to manage that stress?
Well, first and foremost, we have to remember that that's a key element of your caregiving. Caregivers tend to leave themselves for last. They're very busy juggling all those other balls, and taking care of themselves, even if it's managing their stress, is the last thing on their list. As you know, Gayleen, I usually talk about caregivers and those folks for whom they care as being two halves of a whole. And if one half is not healthy, the other half is not going to do well either. So caregivers should not feel guilty about doing something for themselves to try to lower their stress. I think the first thing is going to be we're going to have to lower our expectations. If you're juggling more balls than you used to juggle, if you've got more people in your house and more laundry and more mess, you might have to lower your expectations. Beds might not get made. You know, right now, I'm not a family caregiver, but I've had to deal with the fact that my dining room has become my office and it's a mess. Um, but lower your expectations. You're not going to do everything perfectly. I know that we've seen experts or heard experts say for those who are trying to teach at home, teach their children at home, if you don't do the math exactly right, that's okay. If you don't get all the assignments done, that's okay. And it's the same way with your caregiving duties right now. Just lower your expectations a bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just do the best you can right now. The other thing that I would suggest is limit your news watching. We want to know what's going on, especially right now. We've got so much going on in the country and we've just had elections. But having that news on all the time can kind of grate on your nerves and get you a little more upset maybe about what you're hearing on the news. Also, depending on the loved one for whom you're caring, they might pick up on that stress. Sometimes just the voices on those newscasts, they sound very loud and very emotional. And so I would suggest limit your news watching. I'd also suggest that we use social media right now sparingly and strategically. Now might be the time to spend more time looking at the puppy and the kitty videos and the recipes and the pictures of people's grandchildren, rather than some of the controversial things on social media, because again, all those things can wear on your nerves and get you upset. I think it's a good idea to limit your caffeine intake. I'm a Diet Coke girl, and sometimes by about 3 o'clock, I need my boost, but it's best if we don't overdo it. I certainly don't overdo it on the sugar either. That can kind of add. And another crucially important thing that's easier now. When we first started this in March, it could be more of a challenge. Get outdoors. Research shows that simply being outdoors really does improve your mood. It raises those endorphins. And if your loved one for whom you're caring can get outdoors, do the same thing. Some studies across the world have shown that folks with dementia actually have fewer agitated behaviors if they spend 30 minutes outside. So if you can get yourself outside in the sun, and I believe I also read some article that says that vitamin D helps strengthen you against COVID. So it's another good reason to get out of doors.
So Jane, we mentioned the crowded household. What could folks do to help keep tensions at bay?
Well, I think that first of all, we need to realize that we're all kind of grieving right now. Uh, I was talking with my sister recently. She has a daughter who should have graduated from college. Well, she did, but it was through the mail. And her youngest daughter was to graduate from high school. And they're both grieving that they didn't get to have those last few weeks of fun. And the high schooler didn't get to have the prom. And now there's no graduation ceremony. We're all grieving just a bit. We might be grieving because we've lost our usual activity. I can't go to, I haven't been able to go to Nautilus and go to my Zumba class, and that makes me sad. We may be grieving loved ones that we may have lost during this time, whether to COVID or some other reason. The point is everyone's emotions might be a little tender right now, and we need to be aware of that and a little bit more understanding. As parents, if we've got those kids at home, we need to remember that our college kids have been off on their own and they may be staying up late and not getting up as early as we would like. And so maybe we need to be a little gentler with them, but they need to be aware too that now that they're back home and the laundry's piling up and Mom's trying to juggle all those balls. So I think it's important that we be tender with each other right now and a little bit more understanding. I think we need to, again, respect everyone's habits. If we've got, more people in the household, I think it's very important to do some things to get yourself some respite. Those college kids are home, and you're also caring for your 84-year-old father. Put them together, set them together, and let them tell stories or share songs, do some games. I even love this new term I heard, virtual respite. If you have a friend or family member who could FaceTime in with your loved one and spend some time talking with them, again, sharing stories, looking at pictures together virtually, this gives you a moment to step back. It gives you a break when you're not on or you're not doing all the entertaining. But I think that can be helpful as well.
Great advice. Thank you, Jane. I also know that we've been at this stay at home or safer at home for weeks now. I think Sarah said we're in week 12 or something. And some families have adopted and adapted. But what are some lessons learned that we can still try to implement as we continue on this journey?
I think one crucial lesson learned is that we might need a plan B, because for many of us, in many ways, plan A is not working. And so this has pointed out the need to have a plan B. So for instance, if you were the primary caregiver for someone, what would you do if you became ill? Who would be your go-to? And if you don't already have that person in mind, or that person in the plan, start thinking about that, because whether right now you get COVID or not, something could happen. God forbid you fall down the stairs carrying the laundry basket. But it's important to think about how you might be able to get some backup. The great news is during COVID, more and more entities have started doing delivery. Pharmacies that didn't deliver before deliver now, so sign up for it. If your pharmacy doesn't, call around and see who does, because that can be one less errand you have to run, one less thing you have to worry about. Caregivers can also be a bit stoic. Often folks will say, let me know if there's anything I can do, but we don't let them know. So let them know. If someone offers to help, take it right now. If someone says, I'm getting ready to go to the store, do you need anything? Give them your list. Take them up on it. It can be very, very stress relieving for you. One less thing you have to do. Also, I think it's important that we inventory our basic supplies and medications. Certainly, we all know that thing about toilet paper, and whoops, didn't have a stockpile of toilet paper. But I don't just mean toilet paper, but certainly this is a good time to look at what did you or should you have had stockpiled? And now that things have eased up a bit, can you find those things and stockpile them, so should anything happen again, you have extra, you have plenty. It's a good time to inventory those important documents. If your loved one is not living with you, let's say you have been going to the store once a week for your mom and dad, and you take them to doctor's appointments, but they live in their own home. Do you know where their important documents are? Do you know where they keep them? I tell the funny story that early on, before her dementia developed, I had asked my mom, because I knew she had a living will, and I said, where do you keep your living will? And she told me the glove compartment of the car. Now, I have to tell you, I would have never thought to look there. So I was glad I asked. So find out where those important documents are. Make the list, the detailed list of all medications, and the dosages, any advance directives, those important papers. Find out where they are, and if you don't have them, now's a good time to get them.
So Jane, I have to interrupt you for just a second to ask you if your mother explained to you why she kept that in her glove compartment.
Oh, she absolutely did. She said, well, if I'm ever in a car accident, it will be right there. So I suggested
Okay.
that we make copies, and I keep a copy, and we put a copy in the file cabinet in her office where I thought it would be kept, and we could still leave a copy in the glove compartment just in case. Also, it's very important for caregivers to stay connected. I think we have all experienced what it's like to feel isolated and alone. And if you're a busy caregiver, again, that's the last thing you're going to think about, is connecting for you. But if you can do this, if you can FaceTime a friend, if you can get some girlfriends on FaceTime or Zoom at 9 o'clock at night after everyone is settled, that's a good thing. If you can go out on your front porch and talk to your neighbor who's on their front porch, that's a good thing. It's going to help your mood and it's going to alleviate your stress.
I know sunshine actually does a world of good for my
Oh,
disposition.
absolutely. Well, you and I had talked during March and April with all that rain.
It was
It
tough.
was
It was
it
tough.
was hard. It was
Yeah.
hard.
So, the stay-at-home orders, and now we're in a safer at home. So stay-at-home orders are being relaxed. Do you have any thoughts about what family caregivers might consider when deciding when to venture out?
Absolutely. First, I would suggest contacting the doctor. The physician knows your loved one's condition better than anyone other than you. And sometimes they're up to date on the latest advice, the latest from CDC. So I think a good idea would be to call the doctor and say, "What do you think? Would it be appropriate for me to take dad out?" That's one thing to think about. Also, weigh the risks and benefits. How much will your loved one's mood lighten if they get to go out or if they get to see a friend? Weigh that with the risks and benefits. Can you make sure that folks wear masks? Also, you know, it's okay to change your mind. Maybe you've worked yourself up and you've talked to the doctor and you've got the mask ready and you've decided you're gonna venture out or you're gonna allow this visit, and then at the very last minute your gut says, I'm worried about this. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay. And it's gonna be different for every family. And what we have to accept right now that we're in an unknown situation. We can take every precaution there is and something might go awry. So don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work the way you thought, because we don't know. There's so much that we don't know. And again, every family is going to be different, but those are the three things that I would start with.
Good advice. Thank you. Sarah, do we have any questions from our listeners or the audience?
We do. We have a couple coming in. So, on a personal note, I this has helped me because I have a 4-year-old and then I also have aging parents. And so juggling both of those, working full time from home and just until recently coming back to the office part time. Um, I am a perfectionist in a lot of ways, so I have very high bars and expectations, and I would feel guilty putting my daughter in front of the television set while I had a conference call, but there was really nothing else I could do. And so this has been a really nice way to reinforce, you lower those expectations and don't beat yourself up. So you've made me feel better. So thank
Good.
you very much.
That's
Good. Good.
that's good to know, Sarah. And often particularly when we're talking about advocacy and legislation, but I think it applies here as well. Let's not let perfect get in the way of good.
That's right. That's right. And that is actually one of our first questions in regards to legislation. It says, I know AARP does a lot of work with Congress and the state legislature here in West Virginia. What has AARP done recently to support family caregivers?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I want to give credit where credit's due. West Virginia was the first state in the country that tested every nursing home resident and every staff person from the nursing home, and then went the next step and tested every assisted living resident and staff person in assisted living. So we were out in front of that, and I'm very proud of that. And we've been very transparent in terms of where COVID has been in the nursing homes and the action steps. As the governor likes to say, we ran to the fire to deal with those kinds of things. That hasn't happened across the country. So from a federal perspective or a national perspective, AARP has been very engaged in making sure that there's transparency when it comes to COVID and the testing is happening with nursing home residents. We've been, because visitation has been limited, or there is no visitation basically in nursing homes. We may hear something today later about that being relaxed. But as of right now, nobody was going into the nursing homes. So we wanted to figure out how we could do what we're doing here today and having that visitation more virtually. And so we've been advocating for something called the Access Act, and I'm happy to report that Senator Capito is one of the lead sponsors on that. That would provide some funding to nursing homes and long-term care facilities for the telehealth and virtual visitation. So that was one of the things that we've been advocating for. In terms of other advocacy efforts, Jane, I'm trying to think that we had a virtual lobby week, and we talked to our members of Congress about the Access Act and about providing some funding for state and municipals to help backfill budget crunch issues when it comes to the COVID-19 and what the impact is on the economies. Anything else you can think of, Jane, that we've done in terms of advocacy?
Well, we were concerned, as you mentioned, and with some of the CARES Act language initially that said it would be available for municipalities greater than 50,000. Well, we know here in West Virginia, even our capital city is not quite there, is just on the edge. So we did talk with our members of Congress about that and be cognizant of that for our state. And then, of course, at the local level, right now we're going to be watching up to see about budget cuts. Are there important programs, in-home community-based programs that could possibly face cuts? We want to be really aware of those kinds of things right now, or as we move forward.
Yeah, and just to as a reminder, there's some executive orders, excuse me, some executive orders that have allowed healthcare professionals, advanced practice, registered nurses, to practice up to the full extent of their experience and education, removing some of those artificial barriers. And so we were supportive of that happening, and the Board of Nursing allowing that to happen. So we're looking ahead to see how some of those executive orders might stay in place after the COVID-19 has passed. Also working with our state legislature to look at, hold on just a second, I apologize. So anyway, lots of activities, especially related to advocacy, both at the state and national level. So thanks for that question.
Sure. So just a reminder for everyone participating today, you can submit your questions one or two ways. You can email them directly at brittany.bruce@marshall.edu, or you can hover. There's a toolbar. There's a conversation icon. Click it. That's the chat feed. You can type your question right there. One other question that just came in, Gayleen, what can employers do to support employees who they know are caregivers during this time? What are some helpful hints to employers?
Yeah, so that is a really good question. I'm going to look to Jane to give some advice, because she is really our caregiving expert. And as an employer, I know AARP has done some things to support employees, but I'll ask Jane to comment, and then I'll chime in.
Well, again, if it's possible, we all know that there's work to be done, but can you lower your expectations just a bit? Can you be understanding that your employee may not be able to juggle all those balls as well as they did before? And so if you can give a little leeway in when things are due, if it's okay with you, if your employee works on a report at midnight rather than at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, certainly be cognizant of how many times they might be required to be on a video conference like this. If you could be sensitive to that and maybe not have 12 of those in a day. Also, employers can look at their benefit packages. I know I have a friend who found out that her insurance package through her work allows her to have some virtual counseling, virtual therapy, if you will, and she has been utilizing that. She's an elementary school principal who was trying to manage and do work from home. She also has just brought this winter both of her parents who are in their 80s to live with her. So she was managing all that. And so she has availed herself of the virtual counseling. So if that's something that's in the benefit package, certainly employers should remind their employees of that, because that's a great way to get a little extra oomph and support if you're juggling all those things.
That's great. Thank
Yeah,
you very
and
much.
I also think that, flexibility, I think is what we're talking about. If employers can be flexible with their employees who are caregiving and juggling, maybe childcare, it could be parent care, spouse care, and the idea of being able to work from home. I think that provides that flexibility as well. And I know at AARP we walk the walk as we talk the talk, and so we actually have the ability to have some family caregiving leave. So we have a certain amount of hours that we can take as family caregivers to take a spouse, a parent, a loved one to a doctor's appointment, or to take some time off as caregiving leave. So that's something that employers might want to consider.
That's great. I'm going to turn it over to Brittany. Brittany, do you have any questions for Jane and or Gayleen?
Yeah, I have a couple, and we kind of mentioned this earlier. I had one come in. It says, my mom has dementia and is in a nursing home. I have been FaceTiming with her, but I'm not sure she knows who I am. Should I bother to continue these visits?
Wow.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but I can tell you from my experience, from my education, as well as my personal experience, absolutely, especially if the mother smiles during the call. Especially when it comes to a condition like dementia. And of course, I have said repeatedly during this presentation that caregivers should think about themselves, but sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it is about them. And if your mother seems to be happy on that call, if she seems to be enjoying engaging with you, if there's a smile on her face, then it's well worth it. And please know in your heart that you're doing something very caring and very loving for your mother, even if she's not quite sure who you are. And I'm betting that deep in her heart, she knows that you're a wonderful person, even if she can't quite connect exactly who you are. So I would say, yes, please continue.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's great. Thank you for that. And then I had another one come in. I am not a family caregiver, but my neighbor down the street is caring for her husband who has advanced cancer. What can I do to help her?
First thing I would do is simply reach out in some way. It may be that she needs a listening ear. It may be that she's just, the wife is just very lonely. Also, I can only imagine how fearful she would be because her husband has probably got a compromised immune system. And so she's probably very worried about the possibility of him contracting COVID. So offer to run errands for her. Let her know that it's okay if, let's say, she puts the grocery list outside, tapes it to the front door, so you don't even have to exchange. And then if you're willing to put the groceries, in her garage or by her front door, so that there doesn't have to be a connection. And don't be offended if she doesn't want to come out and chat with you. But again, let her know that you're there. Make specific offers. Do you need something from the store? Because again, sometimes if we just say, is there anything I can do? The person is going to be less likely to jump right in. But so make suggestions. Could I go to the pharmacy for you? Could I stop by Kroger's and get something for you? Those kinds of things I'm sure would be most helpful.
Yeah, and I know my neighbors. I've said, I'm making a pot of soup. Can I bring you some? We'll have more than enough. Can I bring you some of that soup? And so just being neighborly. I think that's a important right now in the crazy times we're living in.
Okay, thank you. And then I also have one more. So I know today we've mainly focused on people who are taking care of their loved one at home, but what if we are caring for someone in a nursing home or assisted living facility? What should we be thinking about, or what questions should we be asking?
Yeah, so Jane, we have resources, don't we?
We do. Actually, if you go to the aarp.org/caregiving website, there you can find lots and lots of things, and AARP kind of has a list of things to consider. One of the personal things I would recommend is take a deep breath and trust, because sometimes that's all we can do. Sometimes that might be all we can do, but certainly that is an added stress if you're used to being there every day. One of the things that I would suggest and that AARP suggests is just contact that facility, ask to speak with someone. Again, Galen has already referred to the fact that the state of West Virginia has been quite open and proactive in reporting COVID cases and testing. So we might have it just a little bit less stress here in West Virginia than in other places. But ask about how things are going. Ask if they've had any new cases. Ask, what they're doing. Do they have the PPE that they need? Is there the capability of having a virtual visit? Is there a staff member that's willing to use their phone for a FaceTime? Does the facility have the ability to do a Zoom call? I would ask those questions. Also, how is the nursing home or assisted living planning to communicate with you? Galen and I heard a horrible situation on one of our national teletown halls where in another state, a facility refused to talk with the families. So find out how that facility is planning on communicating. Will they send out text messages? Will they send out email updates? I think that's very important to think about. And then again, please go to the AARP website because there's a list of things that you should consider if you're thinking about taking your loved one out of the long-term care facility. And also, if you suspect there might be an issue, something that really is bothering you, call the West Virginia State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and I can even give you that number. It's not on our slide, but that number is 1-800-834-0598.
Will you give that number one more time, Jane, please?
I sure will. 1-800-834-0598, and that's the West Virginia State Long-Term Care Ombudsman.
Excellent. And I will tell you that the idea of taking a loved one out of the facility is a difficult decision, obviously. And I think it depends on a lot of different circumstances. Every situation is different, and you have to evaluate that for yourself. But as to Jane's point, if you go to the AARP website, you can find kind of a list of things to think about and make an informed decision for your loved one and you. We have a ton of resources available for family caregivers. You'll see on the screen, we have a toll-free family caregiving support line. There's an elder care locator. The Alzheimer's Association is a great resource as well. It's a 24/7 hotline. Is that right, Jane?
Yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, some coronavirus resources at aarp.org/coronavirus. So I recommend folks take note of this. We can also make the slides available, Sarah, to you and Brittany, that you can share with others. But we also have a prepare to care guide that is available. And if you come to aarp.org, you can find that online. The guide's free and available to everybody. The caregiver toll-free number, I'm reminding myself, is open from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Daily, Monday through Friday, and at 877-333-5885. And there's also a online community, Jane, is that right?
Whoops, had the mute button on. Yes, it's called Community Connections. And again, you can go to the AARP website and find that. It's an online listing, really, of resources in communities. You can type in your zip code and see resources, particularly that are related to the pandemic and what's going on right now. You can also schedule, if you just need a friendly voice call. We have the family caregiving support line if you have specific caregiving questions, but maybe you just need a friendly call. You just need to hear a voice. We you can schedule a call. You can type in your information, and then a trained volunteer will make a call. I happen to know someone who scheduled a call to her father. She had been calling and checking on her father, and you know how sometimes we kids and parents are, and they'd much rather talk to somebody else. So you can even schedule something like that and have a friendly voice call to your loved one.
And there's the Family Caregivers discussion group as well,
Yes.
that you can connect and share stories and get answers to caregiving questions. You don't have to be an AARP member to call into that support line or to join the online community. So we're here to help. I think that's the important message. And I think to every family caregiver that's out there, the other important message is to know you're not alone. And in this pandemic, we are alone together.
No, and I think you raised some very valid and great points. I know that sometimes in West Virginia, we just have this demeanor, and I can say this because I was born and raised here, but it's like this very trusting demeanor. So we don't ask questions, but we need to kind of get over that and make sure that we're engaged. Everyone deserves a healthcare advocate. It's okay to ask questions, and whether your parents are in a nursing home or your child is at daycare, asking those important questions like, can we have a schedule of the activities? Are you planning to take my child off site during this time? What are the internal measures? Are your staff required to wear masks? What's their traveling protocols? It's okay to ask those questions. And
Absolutely.
I've had to learn that the hard way to get engaged when I take my parents to their doctor's appointments. And my dad was on dialysis for a point of time, and not understanding that process. And I had to just get over it and get up in his business. And of course I was okay, and he was okay with that because he was with me and allowing me to be with him. But like same thing for a child and families. And so I think that you provide some great guidance here. Are there any other questions? Last call for questions. Brittany, do you have anything?
I don't have anything coming in right now.
Okay, final thoughts for AARP West Virginia. Gayleen, Jane, do you have any other final thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share some information and resources, some suggestions and recommendations and tips for family caregivers. I will say that, to your point, as West Virginians, the other attribute that we have is that we are fiercely independent, right? And so to Jane's point, the idea of asking for help sometimes seems foreign to us, but it's important, particularly now with everything that's going on, that we are open to one another, that we're neighborly, that we offer our help, and that we take advantage of the offers that are given to us for help. So with that, I want to tell you that AARP likes to pride itself on being two things: a wise friend. So we're providing trusted information. As I said, you can find information and tips on how to help support family caregivers, how to avoid the spread of the virus that we're dealing with at our website, which is aarp.org, or specifically you can go to aarp.org/WV for more resources and information. We have e-newsletters that we put out weekly. Of course, the AARP magazine and the AARP bulletin is chock full of information, and daily updates can be found at aarp.org coronavirus. The second thing that we pride ourselves on being is a fierce defender. Is that right, Jane?
Absolutely. And while we have tried to offer tips and resources today, I'll be the first to admit we don't have enough resources for family caregivers. Family caregivers every day are facing challenges and need help that sometimes just isn't available. So the one thing we do want to do is help them, as Gayleen said, recognize that they're not alone and recognize those emotions that they're struggling with. They're busy trying to figure out tasks and accomplishing tasks, but while they're doing those tasks, they're struggling with those emotions, whether it's guilt, whether it's grief, whether it's fear, whether it's stress. And we want folks to know that we understand that and that they're not unusual, and that there are folks who have felt the very same thing, and that we are here for you as just that listening ear or that person that understands. I'd like to give everybody just a virtual, all those caregivers out there, a virtual hug and a virtual pat on the back, because I know that you're doing the very best you can. I've said this for years. I do not believe that there's a caregiver that wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to try really hard today to be a bad caregiver. Every moment they're doing the best they can. Now that level of best might change depending on circumstances, but every caregiver is simply trying to do the best they can, and we applaud them and we do support them.
Again, thank you so much for this opportunity. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, AARP West Virginia. And we appreciate the expert advice. And everyone stay safe, and please join us next week.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Thank you.